everybody. Happy election night. I'm Morgan Trau. I'm News 5's Columbus Bureau reporter. I cover the Statehouse. I'm in downtown Columbus right now, but I'm here with legal analyst and Case Western Reserve University elections law professor and a very good source of mine, Atiba Ellis. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here. It's an exciting evening, very important evening.
Yeah, so August, our special election, this is what we're talking about today. We actually got our first dump of early voting results. So early numbers are out. I want to talk to you a little bit about them. Right now, Vote No has a very, very strong lead. Of the 580,000 votes that are counted so far, 70% vote no. Are you surprised by this?
I'm not surprised that Vote No is in the lead. I am surprised that it's such a big margin this early. But at the same time, it seems like there was a strong movement for folks who tend to vote early to go vote no. So the lead comes as no surprise.
And for those who are just jumping on, we're talking about issue one. Issue one is the proposal to make it harder to amend the Ohio Constitution. So what that would do was raise the threshold for a constitutional amendment to pass from 50%, which is a simple majority, to 60%. And we've been talking about how the first batch of early voting results has come in. And, these numbers, they tell us a lot of different things, like you just mentioned. The Democrats and the nonpartisan Republicans who are all behind Vote No, they are very excited by this. Right. And you've said that for something like this, you're not surprised at all. But why does early voting tend to favor more progressive issues?
Well, it tends to favor more progressive issues because progressives tend to want to use all of the available means for voting. Certainly, it's more convenient to go and vote early or to vote absentee. And progressives historically have tended to do that. So it's no surprise to see that the progressive side of this issue has the lead in front. Now, here's the thing. Election day just ended, 34 minutes ago. And the converse tends to be true as well. The more conservative voters tend to vote on election day. Let's just call it leaning into tradition, right? Because early voting hasn't been a real thing until the past decade or so. So it might be the case, and we haven't seen those numbers yet, that there was a barnstorm on election day in terms of the vote yes movement. So it remains to be seen.
We just got another drop. It's still staying about 70%. We're seeing a lot of different counties, a lot of GOP-leaning counties that are voting no. I guess tell me, people have tried to say, this is, Democrats want vote no and Republicans want vote yes. But we've been seeing that isn't necessarily the case with this. I mean, if we look at Lake County, which has a GOP stronghold, they went 70% no. Tell me a little bit about why you think that might be.
Well, I think that there's probably an instinct about how elections should work in the United States that might transcend party. I mean, it's one thing to disagree on how governments run, but one of the basics of democratic ideals is that the majority gets the rule. And I would say that our instinct about who the majority is that 50% plus one. So I would think that idea might transcend party lines, might transcend ideology of the moment. It's sort of our instinct to think that democracy means the majority in most instances gets to make the decisions. The simple majority, I should say.
And while we're looking at this, there's only a couple counties that haven't been counted yet. There's about 700,000 early votes that were cast. Is this a strong enough lead for vote no when we start getting the election day results?
Odds are that it probably is, unless there was sort of massive turnout today that hasn't been captured and reflected yet. Given these numbers, it might be the case that vote no has a comfortable lead. But again, until the returns come, it's impossible to say for certain.
And I guess we're looking at, the polls closed, like you said, at 7:30. People who were still in line, they're able to still vote. Do you think that the reason why so many people decided to vote was because this issue is so important for so many people? I know we've talked about this before, but when we talk about elections and how they're run, this really seemed to bring a lot of different people together.
Yeah, I think that there is, well, let's put it this way. It's easy to sort of get into the fact that the most important, to some people in the state, right, the most important initiative on the November ballot is the initiative concerning reproductive rights. And that is heavily partisan. And it's easy to read it through that lens. But certainly there are other issues on the ballot, drug legalization, for example, that may come to bear. And those lines don't tend to be neatly Democrat and Republican. And moreover, I think that Democrats can see this as a fairness issue, liberal leaning folks seeing it as a fairness issue, and more traditional and conservative folks might see this as a tradition issue, right? That they've known that this is the basic structure of American democracy and that they want to hold to that. So that might create what legal theorists might call an interest convergence between groups that might not tend to agree.
And that abortion vote that you mentioned, this election really could either pave the way or impede on that abortion amendment moving forward in November. How important would that 60% threshold, if it is raised to 60%, do you think that would hurt the chances of the abortion amendment passing?
Well, I think the history in other states where abortion amendments have been offered on the ballot gives us a hint about this, right? Places like Michigan, I think, where it passed, but it passed at somewhere around the 56, 57% level. None of the states where it did pass did it reach 60. So if Ohio's consistent in that regard, it becomes a really high hurdle if the goalpost, so to speak, is raised to 60%.
Yeah, I believe Michigan, which is the state that we're most similar to in terms of population size and in terms of typical politics, it's been a little bit different lately. They got 56%. Right. Kansas got 59%.
But no one's hit 60 in terms of one of these referenda. So it becomes a challenge. I want to pose one other way to think about this, right, in terms of democratic accountability. In having conversations about this today, one of the thoughts that occurred to me was, given that on the one hand, conservatives lean into tradition and sort of referenda are supposed to be simple majorities, on the other hand, folks who are concerned about gerrymandering generally, right, and given Ohio and other states that have had their executives and legislatures in conservative hands, worry about the partisan gerrymandering effects. So it might be possible that looking at the initiative process, the referendum process, is like the last way that the people can speak directly to the issues and override their legislatures. And so I think that interest may be one that liberals and libertarians and conservatives all might have in common.
And I guess that theory definitely seems to show in these early voting. And I think that we're going to see as it gets further on into the night how that pans out. I want to say thank you so much for joining me. I know this was pretty quick, but I just want you to know that, your insight is very valuable for all of us. And thank you. Thank you for joining us on this.
Thank you. And I look forward to the conversation. Certainly there is the 2024 elections coming up and the vote in November as well. So look forward to talking more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments for later, and we're going to check in on those. And you can also find us both on Twitter. Anything like that, we're happy to help with any questions people have about the elections or what's going on.